to his renowned family. According to the Daily Beast, Prince William has won because Prince Andrew will never again be seen in pictures with him. According to them, Prince Andrew has endured a lot of controversy over the years, but a recent event has dealt him a devastating blow that is both personal and quite sad. This news hits at the heart of his private existence, leaving him vulnerable and shaken, far from the spotlight of courtroom battles and royal scrutiny. The timing couldn't be more disastrous for a man who is already having a hard time repairing his reputation. What sad news has surfaced regarding Prince Andrew, and why has it temporarily struck his detractors with pity? Prince Andrew's creation. From pampered child to embarrassment in the palace, Prince Andrew was born into a realm of gilded ceilings and marble hallways where nobility frequently flouted the law. He was so encased in luxury from infancy that it seemed impossible for reality to penetrate. However, as the years went by, that armor of protection turned into a prison of expectations, till the meticulously crafted picture of the Queen's radiant son deteriorated into a far darker portrait of shame at the age of 65. Once portrayed as the shining soldier of the crown, the charming prince had become its biggest embarrassment. The rumors that had been circling him for decades weren't just unfounded insults. Those inside the palace refused to face the signs, the unmistakable, persistent warnings. One reality dominated Andrew's world even as a youngster. Everyone was subject to the rules except him. He was already teaching a risky lesson before the scandals, tabloids, and notorious interviews that would characterize his demise. People close to him spoke of a youngster who pushed boundaries out of entitlement rather than innocence. When he was just 5 years old, he walked confidently through the stable yard at Windsor Castle, where guards and grooms were hard at work. He made fun of the troops' stiff stance, swung sticks at the whore's legs, and even tortured the dogs for his own entertainment. He only became more brazen when staff begged him to stop. In a savage attempt at discipline, 2 irate grooms finally lifted the little prince and threw him into a pile of manure, smothering him with muck. Another child might have been changed by the experience. It reaffirmed something else totally for Andrew. The embarrassment might go away, but privilege persisted. Another altercation shortly followed, solidifying the lesson. He brutally beat up a palace footman, causing the man to violate protocol and hit Andrew in the face, resulting in a bruised eye. The act against a royal child was appalling. However, the Queen herself rejected the footman's offer of resignation, saying that Andrew had earned the strike. Andrew recovered, the servant remained, and a disturbing realization began to grow. He would be untouchable even if he incited others to violence. Daring people to cross boundaries he himself would never pay for was his real strength. The early misadventures weren't innocuous. They turned into preliminary drawings of Andrew's future self. The youngster who made fun of the guards' rigidity developed into the prince, who insisted on military-style curtain drawing and scolded employees for letting in even a little light. The man who demanded that his teddy bears be kept in rigid shape and threw fits when they weren't was once a child who played cruel games in the stable yard. From the outside, these peculiarities appeared strange, even humorous. But to the royal attendants who put up with his outbursts, it was humiliating, petty, and unrelenting abuse. There could not have been a more stark contrast between Andrew and his sister-in-law Diana by the early 1980s. Diana's grace and vulnerability wowed the world, but Andrew's reputation took a completely opposite turn. He was envisioned as the youthful, gregarious prince who would enchant nations with his romances while looking gorgeous in uniform. Rather, those closest to him at work spoke of a haughty and conceited man, a prince who was a weapon with his entitlement. Former maid Charlotte Briggs remembered a humiliating incident in which Andrew became enraged because she had left even the slightest opening in his drapes. It was an inexcusable error in his opinion. It reminded her of his brutality. The tales mounted. The fury over insignificant errors was matched by military precision in the arrangement of the stuffed creatures. An almost 40-year-old man who still acts like the 5-year-old who used to make fun of soldiers in the yard. The views of his parents were not very helpful. Because of the Queen's indulgence, he was excused, and Prince Philip, who never holds back when speaking, dismissed him as the spare. A man free from the burdens of the throne, but always second to Charles. Andrew's impulsive temperament thrived because of that freedom, which was supposed to be a blessing. Thus, Andrew welcomed controversy while his brothers learned to be tactful before the media. As Randy Andy, he flaunted his relationships with models and actresses and presented himself as though accountability was a term reserved for others. His riches, his connections, and his ancestry, before the fractures started to show and the once glitzy prince turned into a man drowning in gossip, accusations, and eventually shame, these defenses kept him untouchable. What started out as youthful conceit would thereafter develop into something far more harmful. A path that led directly into the spotlight of a public controversy. It was only a preview. Here is the whole tale. Details that are painful and unpleasant and will make you shudder. Are you ready to deal with it? Hold on tight. How royalty become risky due of Prince Andrew's careless decisions. The 1986 wedding between Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson resembled something from a fairy tale. The press loved them, the country rejoiced, and the monarchy reveled in what appeared to be a new era of stability. Fairy tales, however, don't always endure. The controversy caused the marriage to fall apart in a matter of years. While Andrew continued his own careless actions that further widened the rifts, Sarah was exposed in compromising situations that were reported in the tabloids. Their friendship had evolved into a strange blend of intimacy and distance by the time the divorce was finalized, which only served to fuel additional rumors. Andrew was no longer a trusted royal in the eyes of the crown. He was now volatile, erratic, and dangerously reckless. His reputation only got worse in the 1990s. While typical British families faced financial hardships and austerity, Andrew was traveling the world on state funds. He became accustomed to flying in private planes, helicopters, and five-star resorts. He was called Air Miles Andy by the media, who made fun of the millions he spent on travel. Investigations turned up benefits he received from his military position in addition to excessive vacation time. It infuriated those who could hardly afford heating to see a spoiled prince brushing off criticism as though his rank gave him immunity. However, the conceit extended beyond financial gain. Whispers became clear inside Buckingham Palace. Staff observed his obsession with status symbols, his metal-studded uniform, his feverish search for glitzy ladies, and his continual need to be seen at exclusive clubs. According to friends, he was naive, susceptible to flattery, and constantly seeking the appearance of significance. Initially inconspicuous, this fault would eventually become the very thing that brought him down. His naval career ended by the late 1990s, leaving him adrift. Andrew was given the position of trade ambassador, which was purportedly an opportunity to boost British industry overseas, to give him a sense of purpose. However, he surrounded himself with corrupt businessmen, dictators, and questionable transactions, rather than promoting trade. The very authorities compelled to collaborate with him were embarrassed when American diplomatic cables that were later released characterized him as tone-deaf, haughty, and conceited. The position that was supposed to boost Britain's stature instead served as a platform for Andrew's personal connections, where he exchanged his royal name for access, power, and favors. It had changed from being a sign of military dignity to a sign of greed. He was often made fun of by the media. Despite this, Andrew walked with a smug sense of confidence, knowing that his mother was constantly watching out for him. At every point, Queen Elizabeth protected him by covering scandals, paying off debts, and persuading herself that protecting her son's honor was more important than the growing harm to the kingdom. But the reality was visible to the servants behind the palace gates. Andrew was no longer merely a child. He was a liability. His self-centeredness had no bounds. His careless actions and the increasingly poisonous company he maintained. But in 2024, a fresh accusation emerged, this time about an enigmatic Chinese billionaire who was subsequently identified as Yang Tongbo, but was initially listed in court documents as HX. In March 2023, the UK government declared him a national security threat and prohibited him from entering the country. Investigators found that Six had gained an uncommon degree of confidence from Prince Andrew. According to letters, Six was given permission by Andrew's own advisor to represent the prince in negotiations with possible Chinese investors. According to one letter, Andrew sat at the very top of a tree that many people would desire to be on, aside from his innermost circle. It was a shocking discovery. With records on his devices demonstrating attempts to utilize his relationship with Andrew for political and commercial leverage, authorities accused H6 of having ties to the Chinese Communist Party's influence activities. Andrew's office swiftly asserted that he had severed communication as soon as the issues were brought up, saying he had only ever met with H6 through formal channels and had never addressed private issues. However, the defense sounded flimsy. Critics saw it as a rehashing of the same plot. Only when a relationship got too embarrassing to conceal did Andrew distance himself. It was impossible to overlook the similarities to Jeffrey Epstein. Once more, Andrew appeared to have dangerously bad judgment when choosing friends. He didn't seem to be able to tell when he was being utilized again, and once more his actions endangered the monarchy's reputation. The optics were disastrous even if he wasn't involved in spying. And somebody accused of spying for a foreign power is rubbing shoulders with a senior royal. Unlike some of his other issues, the incident did not blow up with the same graphic headlines. The damage, however, was equally serious in palace and government circles. The number of questions increased. Is there any role that Andrew could be trusted with? Was his need for approval so overwhelming that he would always be involved with crooks, spies, and opportunists? If you think it's crazy, you'll be shocked to learn that Jeffrey Epstein was introduced to him by Ghislaine Maxwell. The Epstein scandals will soon come to light in ways no one could have predicted, so stay tuned. Prince Andrew is cast into Epstein's shadow after losing his regal prerogative. Luxury had always appealed to Prince Andrew. He yearned for the glitzy way of life, private planes, extravagant homes, and the continual presence of rich people, models, and actors. He overlooked or even purposefully disregarded the unspoken price of pursuing such a world. The relationship should have aroused suspicions when he was introduced to Jeffrey Epstein by Ghislaine Maxwell. Epstein's reputation was already marred by unsavory reports and was being discussed in high places. Andrew didn't leave, even though any careful guy would have. He leaned closer. He was deluded by prestige and greed. This was not shocking to those who worked with him. His weird obsessions, his haughtiness, and his tantrums had long been tolerated by the palace staff. They believed that the real Andrew will one day be revealed to the world. The man who had tantrums over drapes, yelled at maids over misplaced teddy bears, and insisted on obedience from everyone in his vicinity. Additionally, the notorious picture of him with Virginia Jew, who was then a teenager, appeared next to Maxwell, Andrew's arm around her exposed waist. Those at the palace were not surprised. It was affirmation. Epstein, however, was not the first to bring Andrew to ruin. Years had passed before his degeneration became apparent. His reputation had already tarnished by the late 1990s. He should have been able to start again after his 1996 divorce from Sarah Ferguson. Rather, it paved the way for even more humiliation. Images of Ferguson being sucked by her financial advisor while on vacation caused a stir in the media months later. The royal family was humiliated by the incident, but the public was even more perplexed by Andrew's insistence on keeping his relationship with his ex-wife. After their divorce, Andrew and Sarah lived together intermittently for years, which led to a lot of conjecture. Were they bonded together by money? Was he protecting her, or was she protecting him? The murmurs continued, but no one could be sure. Andrew, however, adhered even more to his status as Randy Andy by having affairs with socialites, models, and actresses. Even though his alleged affair with Caprice Bourret ended in mockery, it simply served to feed the headlines. Once hailed as a handsome young prince, Andrew has devolved into a middle-aged caricature who was ridiculed for frantically attempting to maintain his boyhood persona. The Queen attempted to reroute him in 2001. He was named Britain's special representative for foreign investment and trade by her. The position was intended to provide him with honor, meaning, and an opportunity to serve his nation. Rather, it granted him permission to engage in his greatest vices. Andrew transformed the job into a personal empire instead of constructing bridges for British businesses. He surrounded himself with controversial people, stayed in upscale hotels, and flew in private jets. He reportedly had close friendships with the children of dictators, such as Sif Gaddafi, the son of the infamous Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. Why a senior royal was sleeping with autocrats was a topic of discussion. When U.S. diplomatic cables were leaked in 2010, it became clear how American officials actually perceived him: haughty, impolite, and startlingly indifferent to corruption issues. He shocked diplomats during a lunch in Kyrgyzstan by yelling at journalists and claiming that governments should disregard popular opinion. Andrew disgraced his nation rather than advancing British ideals. Arrogance, however, may not have been his most dangerous weakness. He needed to be flattering. Rich businessmen soon discovered that they could get a British prince by offering compliments. Andrew made dubious transactions as a result of this weakness. A Kazakh oligarch purchased his former residence, Sunning Hill Park, from him for £15 million, which was significantly more than the asking price. As a silent reminder of dubious activities, the property was abandoned to decay. He kept getting questions about money. What was the source of his wealth? Who was paying for his extravagant way of life? The responses were ambiguous. Ghislaine Maxwell introduced him to Jeffrey Epstein in this suspicious setting. Epstein seemed ideal to Andrew. Epstein was wealthy, well-connected, and surrounded by famous people. He gave Andrew the relevance he so desperately needed. Suddenly, the waning prince had connections to influential people in New York and other places. Andrew never inquired, or if he did, he disregarded the responses. When Britain progressively failed to treat him like a king or queen, Epstein did. Andrew quickly established himself in Epstein's houses. He was on Epstein's private jet, according to flight logs. He was spotted by witnesses at the home in New York. Andrew was photographed strolling around Central Park with Epstein, grinning as if nothing had happened, even after Epstein had completed his time in prison. For the public, it was unfathomable. A royal prince openly mingling with a convicted felon. For Andrew, everything went according to plan. Persuaded by his own title to shield him from controversy, he dismissed Epstein's crimes as regrettable gossip. Then time came when he was unable to flee. As a teenager, Virginia said that Epstein and Maxwell had trafficked her and forced her to interact with influential men. Prince Andrew was one of those men, she said. One of the most incriminating royal photos of the contemporary era was the picture of Virginia, Andrew, and Maxwell when they were just 17 years old. Everything was refuted by Andrew. "I don't remember meeting her," he said. He said that Maxwell's townhouse had never had an upstairs. He also implied that the picture might not be authentic, but he seemed frantic in his excuses. Suspicion simply grew with each denial. The controversy worsened as reporters continued their investigation. Even after Epstein's conviction, Andrew reportedly remained at his mansion in New York. Such behavior was unthinkable to most individuals. It was just a convenient spot to stay for Andrew. Andrew's name kept appearing in court documents and press stories as more survivors came forward. All of a sudden, his teddy bear fetish, his spoiled outbursts, and the bullying of palace employees didn't seem like juvenile behavior. They appeared to be signs of something far more sinister. A man who had never taught limits, never been told no, and never faced repercussions. The harm could not be undone. What action did the monarchy take in response to his scandals? Were they really free of the Queen's son? Or was he being spoiled? You'll be shocked at the answer, so keep watching. The breaking point of the crown. Britain had put up with Prince Andrew's careless behavior for decades. His continual gluttony, womanizing, insatiable taste for luxury, and haughtiness were all viewed as embarrassing but controllable. The palace thought his imperfections could be hidden. However, everything changed when Jeffrey Epstein came on board. Andrew's status as a wayward prince with excessive privilege abruptly changed. He had turned into a liability and a threat to the survival of the kingdom. By 2019, it was hard to overlook the fall. The prince, who used to stroll boldly next to his mother while wearing a navy uniform, was deprived almost everything that made him a distinctive character. Patronages ended, military decorations were rescinded, and his royal calendar was free of obligations. Piece by piece, he was eliminated. What was left was the picture of a man standing in the shadow of one of the most sinister scandals in contemporary history, rather than a royal serving the realm. The real tale, however, was more complex than the claims and pictures in the headlines. It wasn't simply that Andrew was shown grinning in the background when he was with Virginia, a teenager, his arm around her waist, and Ghislaine Maxwell. The patterns of power that protected him for so long were the subject of the deeper scandal. Epstein had always been surrounded by world leaders, billionaires, politicians, and powerful people. The Marquis itself, however, provided Andrew with safety. His status as the Queen's son provided an imperceptible barrier that avoided responsibility for years. There were murmurs concerning the extent of that protection. According to reports, journalists and networks were under pressure from palace officials to censor articles. The world heard an ABC anchor confess on a hot mic in 2020 that she had the Epstein story 3 years prior, but was blocked because of the presence of Andrew and other influential names. This was more than just a royal embroiled in scandal. Because of this system, he was able to get time and silence that a regular individual facing similar charges would not have been able to. Then the interview went horribly wrong. The moment that made shame out of embarrassment. Andrew sat down for what was meant to be an opportunity to clear his reputation in November 2019. Rather, it ruined what little credibility he still had. When confronted with Virginia's accusations, Andrew denied all of them. He maintained that on the night she said Epstein had trafficked her to him, he had been somewhere else. His daughter's visit to a Woking Pizza Express served as his alibi. However, the world's attention was not drawn to the Pizza Express defense. It was something unfamiliar, something so weird that he became a worldwide joke. Andrew Cooley said he couldn't perspire when asked about rumors that he had been spotted perspiring a lot while dancing with Virginia in a nightclub. He said that he was unable to sweat because of an adrenaline overload that injured his sweat glands during the Fallen's fight. The world laughed at the excuse. There was no longer any mention of the prince in terms of reverence or even indignation. They were making fun of him. He developed into the man who declared, "I don't perspire." From that point on, his demise quickened. Public pity vanished. In addition to Andrew's responses, the interview was deemed a disaster because it demonstrated his utter ignorance. He appeared to be certain that his title and his account of what happened would be sufficient to dispel any skepticism. Rather, he demonstrated to the world what his detractors had been saying for years, that he was conceited, disconnected from reality, and remarkably unfit for responsibility. He was no longer under the royal family's protection. A terrible calculation was being made behind the royal doors. The current monarch, King Charles, saw that Andrew was more than just a private scandal. He symbolized a rift between the monarchy. The institution had depended on silence and concealment for years. Now that the entire building was being questioned, Andrew started to disappear. According to reports from 2023 and 2024, Charles was consciously trying to put his brother at a remove. Family get-togethers were increasingly avoiding Andrew and his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson. Even Sandringham's Christmas customs, which are closely associated with senior royals, were under scrutiny. Keeping Andrew in the spotlight would prolong the scandal. Eliminating him would allow the monarchy to survive. According to insiders, Prince William has been among the most vocal supporters of excluding Andrew entirely. He is aware of how shaky public confidence in the monarchy has become and how the entire royal family is dragged backward each time Andrew's name comes up. William believes that sacrifice is necessary for the crown's future, even if it means putting aside his own uncle. It is clear to Andrew what the message is. Because of a scandal so serious that it rocked the throne itself, he is no longer wanted. The only thing the monarchy could do was to deprive him of his royal responsibilities. However, how did everything fall apart? To find out the truth, stay tuned how Andrew was removed from public life by the crown. The young man who had formerly startled royal guards, kicked horses for amusement, and laughed at the suffering of employees because he thought the world would bend to his will, was now at last understanding what it meant to suffer the repercussions. That careless youngster had matured into a man who is now held accountable. The pivotal moment occurred in November 2019. In just 4 days, Prince Andrew had to make a humiliating announcement following his catastrophic nighttime BBC News interview with Emily Maitlis. He announced on November 28 that he will be resigning from public service for the foreseeable future. For the first time in contemporary history, a senior monarch was forced into semi-retirement due to controversy rather than aging. His name was meant to be cleared in that notorious interview. Rather, it ruined him. In it, Andrew awkwardly justified his acquaintance with convicted criminal Jeffrey Epstein. The woman who accused him of assault, Virginia, was someone he denied ever meeting. He made the strange assertion that on the relevant night, he had been at Pizza Express in Woking. Most notoriously, he claimed that a medical issue during the Falklands War prevented him from perspiring. What he believed to be an ingenious defense turned into a source of mockery. "I don't sweat" made him a worldwide joke overnight. The reaction was instantaneous. Companies, academic institutions, and non-profits rushed to distance themselves from him. Previously proudly displaying his patronage, institutions immediately hurried to remove his name from their records. In a statement, Andrew acknowledged that his relationship with Epstein had seriously interfered with the royal family's operations. Under pressure from all sides, the Queen silently gave her approval for his withdrawal. However, the shame didn't stop there. Andrew continued to refuse to enter the United States even after Epstein passed away in 2019, and Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested in 2020. His attorneys put up a valiant fight to stop the legal proceedings. He avoided being served with papers until 2021, when Virginia filed a lawsuit against him in New York. It was a disastrous litigation. Andrew consented to a settlement reportedly worth up to £12 million in order to avoid a public trial. The Queen herself provided some of the funding. The world viewed it differently, notwithstanding his insistence that it was not an admission of guilt. To quell accusations of mistreatment, a prince had written a check. It couldn't have come at a worse time. Britain was having economic difficulties. Prince Philip had recently passed away in 2021, and the monarchy was still in shock by Harry and Meghan's abrupt departure. Though carefully managed, Andrew's presence was accepted when he passed behind his father's coffin. He was seen on camera, but the image was a disgraced man wandering in silence, far different from the proud naval commander and Falklands veteran he had formerly been. By 2022, when Queen Elizabeth passed away, Andrew's role had become even smaller. He was only given a temporary exception to the rule that he could not wear his military uniform to her funeral. He was jeered by crowds in the streets. Police were forced to step in as protesters yelled, "You're a sick old man." A British prince could no longer go out in public without being openly hated for the first time in generations. King Charles made his position known behind the palace doors. Andrew pleaded for his reinstatement and even thought about taking legal action to regain it. However, he had no more space. Early in 2022, Buckingham Palace revoked his royal patronage and remaining military titles.